The tension was already thick in the CNN green room. Two names were written on the door, Joel Osteen and Oprah Winfrey. They weren't scheduled for a polite policy discussion. No, this was marketed as a generational face-off, a clash between profound experience and unwavering spiritual energy, legacy, and a new kind of momentum. Joel Osteen, the pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author, sat in silence reviewing his notes. He didn't need to rehearse. His message was memorized. His core beliefs were clear. The only unknown variable, Oprah Winfrey's tactics. Oprah Winfrey, the television producer and host, entered 5 minutes before airtime, her signature calm smile in place, the kind that had guided countless challenging interviews during her decades in media. But tonight, she wasn't leading a conversation from her own comfortable studio set. She was sitting across from someone who had no intention of backing down from his message. "You know," Oprah said casually, sipping from a paper cup, "I admire your ambition, Joel. I was ambitious once too. But trust me, this isn't as easy as you think. You've still got a lot to learn and about the complexities of public discourse." The pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author looked up, unfazed. "Good thing I learned fast, and I believe in the power of simple truths." Oprah smirked, but her eyes narrowed. The moderator knocked lightly on the door. "5 minutes, ladies." As they were escorted to the stage, the audience buzzed. Journalists, students, strategists, and more than a few cultural influencers ready to clip every second for social media. The camera operators were locked in. Producers whispered behind the glass. This wasn't just news. It was a clash of perspective. The lights went hot. The floor manager held up a hand. 3 fingers, 2, 1. "Welcome to the exchange," the moderator began. "Tonight, a conversation between renowned television producer and host Oprah Winfrey and celebrated pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author Joel Osteen. Let's begin." But Oprah didn't wait. She leaned in, voice firm. "Joel, you've got spunk, I'll give you that. But spunk doesn't equal deep understanding. And frankly, you're not qualified to speak on behalf of the complex needs of this generation or this country from a purely spiritual platform." The studio gasped. A few phones lit up. The pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author didn't flinch. His eyes locked on Oprah's with the steadiness of someone who had been underestimated before. And this time he had come ready. For a brief moment, you could hear the hum of the overhead lights. Joel Osteen didn't rush his response. He didn't look at the moderator for help or scan the audience for approval. He simply folded his hands on the table, leaned in slightly, and spoke with unnerving composure. "You know, Oprah," he began, "I wasn't surprised you'd go there. When voices of hope and conviction rise faster than expected, long-standing figures like you often have one playbook: dismiss, question authenticity, and hide behind vast experience like it's a shield from accountability to the people." A ripple spread through the audience. Oprah blinked, caught off guard by the calm sharpness in Joel's voice. "I may be seen as new to this kind of stage," the pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author continued, "but I've spent the last 6 years fighting for the hearts and spirits of Americans, in pulpits, in auditoriums, and in countless personal testimonies. I've been in communities listening to everyday struggles while you were conducting high-profile interviews from a studio set. I've seen the real-world impact of decisions that disconnect people from their potential, decisions you've only ever discussed from a privileged position." The moderator raised a brow, but wisely stayed quiet. Joel Osteen's voice didn't rise. Instead, it sank deeper, more focused, more grounded. "You say I'm not qualified?" He turned directly to Oprah. "Now, I don't need your permission to speak for this generation. I've witnessed the broken dreams and struggles that stem from a lack of guidance and a focus on the superficial. My generation feels unheard, unseen, and often dismissed for simply trying to live their lives according to their conscience. You think being qualified means navigating elite media circles? I think it means being unafraid to speak truth that resonates with the soul." Applause broke out, not raucous but sharp, purposeful. Oprah shifted in her seat. Joel Osteen was not done. "You've left your post with polished media clips and lucrative TV deals. I've left mine with scars from the fight to bring hope to people. You may have years on me, but I've got something more dangerous: conviction." That last word landed like a punch. Viewers at home clipped the segment within seconds. On X, the hashtag #TruthResonates was born. Young people reposted the clip with the caption, "He just said what we've all been waiting to hear." Back on set, Oprah tried to regain footing. Well, she said, lips tight, if you think passion equals insight into societal complexities, that says a lot. The pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author tilted his head, smiling faintly. No, Oprah. What says a lot is who's still listening after you stop talking. Oprah Winfrey straightened her back, her face tightening into the controlled calm that once defined her media presence. She'd faced hostile guests. She'd been the voice for the most compelling narratives for years. She knew how to recover, or so she thought. Let's take a step back, Oprah said with a small, practiced smile. I'm not here to attack you, Joel. I just think the stakes are too high to pretend that wisdom and a proven track record don't matter. You're an inspiring communicator, but inspiration alone doesn't solve profound human challenges. Understanding the human condition is hard, and guiding people isn't just about feel-good messages. She leaned into the table, carefully threading her next sentence. America needs more than uplifting sermons. It needs substance, and frankly, when you simplify everything into a message of outrage or simple truth, you lose the nuance and the spirit of the country suffers. The studio grew quiet again. It was a well-rehearsed move. Calm down the temperature, sound like the adult in the room, take back the intellectual high ground. But Joel Osteen wasn't playing by media rules. He waited a beat, then another. And when he finally responded, his tone was so measured, so scalpel sharp, it almost sounded gentle, until you listened to the words. You talk about nuance, Oprah, but where was that nuance when families were struggling to make ends meet, and the cultural narrative you helped shape told them to lean in without addressing their deeper pain? Oprah's expression froze. Joel Osteen leaned slightly forward. Where was that complexity when you amplified discussions about societal changes without truly understanding the quiet anxieties of parents about their children's future, their mental health, and the erosion of their traditional values? The audience murmured. Oprah tried to speak, but Joel Osteen held the tempo. And where was the substance when you promised self-empowerment, then dismissed half the country as backward or unevolved for daring to disagree with the prevailing cultural wisdom? Now the moderator sat back. Even he knew this was no longer a debate. It was a reckoning. Joel Osteen turned to the audience, not to Oprah. We've had decades of polished messaging and expert panelists. What has it given us? A loss of faith in our institutions, a sense of moral drift, and communities where people feel they can't speak their minds. And people like Oprah calling that complicated instead of what it really is. A failure to connect with the human spirit, hiding behind elegant excuses. The crowd burst. Not raucous applause now, but energy. Cheers. Real momentum. Oprah Winfrey opened her mouth, but it was clear she wasn't losing a debate. She was losing the room. The moderator, sensing the shift in the room, finally found his voice. Let's refocus for a moment, he said, glancing between the two figures. Joel, you've criticized what you see as cultural and societal failures, but what would you have done differently? And how does your background as a pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author qualify you to lead those decisions? It was the kind of question meant to expose a lack of depth, the classic trap for someone new, someone who wasn't a policy expert. But Joel Osteen didn't blink. He took a quiet breath, then did something unexpected. He told his truth. I grew up in a family rooted in faith, a family that built a ministry from the ground up, understanding sacrifice and dedication. My father worked tirelessly to spread a message of hope, and my mother supported him through every challenge. I saw the struggles of people in our congregations, families trying to keep their hope alive, trying to find meaning in a world that often felt overwhelming. He looked directly into the camera. Now, we weren't disconnected from the world, but we understood that true strength came from within, from faith, from community. We lived in that space where working hard didn't guarantee peace, just survival for many, and a constant fight for spiritual well-being. Oprah shifted slightly in her chair. Joel Osteen continued, I watched my father pour his life into others, sacrificing his own comfort. I saw mothers and fathers in our community cry silently when job losses hit, or when their children strayed from a path of purpose. And I remember what it felt like as a young man to hear influential voices on TV dismiss people of faith as naive or out of touch because we didn't check their cultural boxes. The audience fell absolutely silent. Joel Osteen's voice didn't tremble, but his eyes shimmered. So when I speak up today, it's not because I read a policy brief or interned for a think tank. It's because I live the gap between the promises of our culture and the pain in people's hearts. I represent the people who get mocked for holding on to traditional values, for praying in public, for believing in a moral framework that transcends temporary trends. He turned toward Oprah now, and I don't need an Ivy League degree or a CNN contract to know what Americans are going through. I just needed to remember where I came from and why. I'll never forget the power of faith and conviction. A single clap rang out, then another. Then the room erupted. Not the partisan noise of a political rally, but the applause of human recognition. Oprah Winfrey looked toward the moderator as if to say, do something, but there was nothing to do. Because in that moment, Joel Osteen wasn't just debating, he was testifying. Oprah Winfrey shifted in her chair, reaching for the glass of water in front of her. Her carefully constructed poise had cracked. For a split second, the studio audience saw something rare. Hesitation. But she recovered. Joel, Oprah began with a forced smile. Your personal story is compelling. I'll admit that. But leading a nation requires more than emotion. It requires understanding complexity, global dynamics, economic systems, intricate social structures. And with all due respect, a pastor's experience doesn't make you a policymaker or a cultural architect. It was a calculated insult dressed as a compliment. And the pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author saw it. He didn't even blink. Interesting, he said, voice cool, because I recall a certain television producer and host amplifying narratives that sometimes encouraged people to believe that material success was the ultimate measure of happiness, or excusing skyrocketing cultural anxieties as simply personal growth challenges. That it was you, right? The audience chuckled uneasily. Oprah's smile strained. Joel Osteen didn't let up. You talk about complexity, but let's talk results. When cultural narratives created deeper divisions, families in my community had to choose between staying silent or standing up for their beliefs, often at the cost of their social standing. That's not a complex theory. That's a moral challenge. Oprah tried to cut in, but Joel Osteen spoke louder, not shouting, but with purpose. When the sense of moral responsibility collapsed in some areas, you told America it was just evolving norms. And when parents begged for a return to fundamental values, you said it was following the latest trends. How do you justify that now? The moderator raised a hand. Let's stay on. No, Joel Osteen said firmly. This is exactly the point. Oprah wants to talk about qualifications. Fine. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a printed article, sliding it across the desk toward the moderator. This is a study showing that communities with strong faith-based support systems navigated recent crises with greater resilience and mental well-being than those who were just told to find their own truth. Not just the wealthy, but diverse communities across the spectrum. Gasps rippled across the studio. Oprah looked down, caught off guard. Joel Osteen wasn't done. You've been a powerful voice in shaping our culture, Oprah. You've influenced millions. So don't question my qualifications to speak on the human spirit when you've been paid to defend cultural narratives that sometimes led to spiritual emptiness. The room erupted, this time not with noise, but with something heavier. A reckoning. Phones lit up. Clips were already being posted. Osteen vs. Oprah surged on X. Even cultural commentators online couldn't deny it. Joel Osteen had landed a blow that couldn't be explained away. Oprah leaned back. Her eyes weren't angry now. They were worried because this wasn't a viral moment. This was a narrative collapse. By the time the next commercial break rolled, the moderator's earpiece was buzzing nonstop. Producers scrambled behind the glass wall. Network execs were texting in all caps. Even rival media outlets had begun clipping Joel Osteen's last line. Don't question my qualifications when you were paid to defend cultural narratives that sometimes led to spiritual emptiness. And across the country, viewers leaned closer to their screens because this wasn't just theater anymore. It was truth televised. Oprah sat stiffly, adjusting her posture, but her words no longer carried the weight they once did. She knew how to manage narratives. But this wasn't a polished interview with carefully vetted questions. This was live, and Joel Osteen had taken command of the stage without needing permission. Even the studio audience, once cautiously respectful of both sides, had turned. Subtle nods, quiet murmurs, glances exchanged. The shift wasn't just intellectual, it was emotional. Joel Osteen's voice cut through again as the show resumed. You know what I think scares people like Oprah? He said calmly. It's not that I'm just a pastor, it's that I'm not afraid of being underestimated for speaking from the heart. Oprah tried to interrupt. That's not, But Joel Osteen pressed on. You think you're helping the country by maintaining decorum and focusing on progress? I think the country's spirit is crumbling beneath that decorum, and people are tired of excuses dressed as enlightenment. Boom. The audience reacted audibly, not with applause this time, but with a deep collective yes that came from the gut. Joel Osteen turned toward the cameras. Now, people watching this at home, you've been told you're not smart enough to ask questions, that you're too traditional, too faithful, too ordinary to have a voice in your own society. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. Pause. I don't represent a specific platform. I represent the people who are done being quiet and just want to live with purpose and dignity. The moderator sat speechless. Oprah Winfrey crossed her arms, trying to regain composure. You can speak in slogans all night, Joel, but this isn't a sermon. It's a debate. Joel Osteen looked at her, eyes calm. No, Oprah, it's a wake-up call. Online hashtags exploded. #WakeUp call or #Osteen claps back. Oprah stunned. Fox News went live with a breaking banner. Joel Osteen dominates debate stage. Oprah on defense. Even MSNBC ran a split screen. Joel Osteen mid-sentence. Oprah caught silent. A rare freeze frame for the woman once known for her articulate responses. Inside the CNN control room, one senior producer muttered under his breath. He just flipped the narrative in under 20 minutes. And in the lobby, a former network executive watching on a screen whispered, "We underestimated the wrong one." Behind the stage, CNN's media team was in overdrive. Producers tried desperately to rebalance the segment's tone. Editors whispered into the moderator's earpiece, urging him to move toward arts and culture or pivot to philanthropy, anything to diffuse the storm that Joel Osteen had ignited. Meanwhile, liberal media figures took to social platforms attempting damage control. Joel Osteen is charismatic, but this is pure populism. Being loud isn't the same as being right. Don't confuse an inspiring moment with deep thought. But none of it stuck because it wasn't just volume, it was clarity. And Joel Osteen had delivered it with surgical precision. He had spoken without jargon, cited real impacts, told his story without spin, and called out disconnect, not with fury, but with heartfelt truth. In the green rooms of other networks, even rival anchors watched the live stream, jaws tight. One senior producer at MSNBC reportedly muttered, "He just turned Oprah into a soundbite." Inside the studio, Oprah tried to salvage ground. She sat forward, arms crossed, tone soft but cutting. You keep bringing up your personal background as if it gives you an edge in every debate. But we're here to talk about broad societal challenges, not personal hardship. The pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author didn't flinch. He waited, let the silence stretch, then answered calmly. I bring it up, Oprah, because the people shaping our culture often forget who lives under it. The audience reacted. A low, deep wave of hums and nods. You say it's not about personal stories. That's exactly the problem. You think guiding culture is abstract. I think it's deeply personal. For millions of Americans, societal narratives aren't headlines. They're the difference between feeling hope or despair, finding purpose or losing their way. Oprah exhaled sharply. I'm not dismissing real pain. Joel Osteen leaned in. But you explain it away as complexities. That's worse. And that was the moment Oprah knew. She couldn't out-narrate her opponent. Not tonight. Joel Osteen wasn't just winning arguments. He was shifting belief. Meanwhile, outside the studio, people had started to gather. Not to demonstrate, but to watch. Phones raised, chants echoing. He speaks for us. We're not invisible. An independent journalist tweeted, Oprah is still speaking. Joel Osteen is speaking America. Inside the control room, a CNN executive tapped his desk repeatedly. This was supposed to be a ratings grab. Now it's a referendum. And it wasn't over because Joel Osteen had one more ace to play. And the next topic was global issues. He didn't just plan to survive it. He planned to bury the myth of disconnected globalism with it. The moderator took a deep breath, trying to bring the conversation to a more measured topic. The fire of domestic and cultural observations had left Oprah on the defensive, and producers were desperate for a subject that might allow her to regain her footing. So, he said, glancing at his notes, let's turn to global issues. Joel, some have said your views are too simplistic when it comes to America's role in the world. They argue that a focus on national well-being and spiritual uplift doesn't protect global stability. What's your response? The pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author leaned back, composed. He didn't rush his words. His voice was lower, measured, but still sharp. I think what Americans are tired of, he said, is seeing their resources, their compassion, and their resolve stretched thin for global initiatives we can't fully define, for outcomes we can't measure, under leaders who rarely connect with the common person. He paused, letting the silence breathe. Let's talk about the human cost of global instability, he continued. When nations struggle or when humanitarian crises erupt, powerful voices often highlight the complex geopolitical angles, but they sometimes miss the desperate parents, the lost children, the shattered communities. Oprah stiffened. Joel Osteen pressed forward. You've been a powerful voice for global empathy, Oprah. You've stood on many stages and discussed grand solutions. You didn't always mention the Americans struggling at home, trying to find purpose, trying to keep their hope alive. Oprah raised a hand. That's unfair. Joel Osteen's eyes locked on her. What's unfair is pretending that the human failures and suffering around the globe are too complex for a moral compass. What's unfair is branding people like me as unqualified because we ask the questions you never wanted to address. Are we taking care of our own first? The room tightened. The audience was no longer clapping. They were listening deeply. Joel Osteen continued, his tone steady. You talk about the nuances of international aid. Fine. Let's ask the hard questions. How much support is truly helping people rise, not just sustaining systems? How much oversight is in place to ensure compassion is truly reaching those in need? Why are American taxpayers asked to shoulder global burdens when our own communities are struggling with a loss of purpose and spiritual well-being? Oprah opened her mouth, but Joel Osteen turned to the moderator. I support strength, not confusion. I support peace through moral clarity, not chaos through indecision. And I support putting the American people's well-being first, not last. The moderator was silent, so was Oprah. Backstage, Oprah's team was furiously texting. One aide to a CNN anchor tweeted, then quickly deleted, "This is spiraling. Oprah's being outflanked in every direction." On Reddit, clips of Joel Osteen's lines exploded with titles like, "He's speaking profound truth around Oprah." Even international outlets picked it up. A UK commentator posted, "The most composed voice on the American stage tonight isn't the veteran, it's the preacher." Inside the studio, Joel Osteen took one final breath. "You wanted to talk about global issues?" he asked. "Here's my position. Empower America first, always. Not because we should fear the world, but because we've earned the right to lead with our values and our compassion, without apology." And with that, he leaned back, expression unreadable. Across the stage, Oprah sat in stunned silence. Her years of experience, media polish, and polished debate lines couldn't shield her anymore. Because Joel Osteen hadn't just won the crowd, he'd taken the mantle of something bigger than the debate. He had become the voice of Americans who felt voiceless in the broader cultural dialogue. And Oprah Winfrey, seasoned, respected, admired, had no words left. By now, the debate no longer felt like a panel. It had evolved into a cultural turning point, a televised flashpoint in the long war between polished media narratives and raw public frustration. Joel Osteen wasn't just winning on points. He had redefined the terms of battle. Oprah Winfrey, once the face of progressive media poise, now sat unusually still. Her voice had vanished beneath the weight of a truth no amount of talking points could smother. The moderator cleared his throat, desperate to restore balance. "Oprah," he asked, "do you want to respond to Joel's statements regarding global issues and the focus on national well-being?" Oprah inhaled slowly. I've served during an incredibly complex period of cultural evolution. We made tough calls, and yes, mistakes were made, but no one was held accountable," Joel Osteen interjected, his tone flat and final. "That's the problem, Oprah. You represent a generation of cultural leadership that escapes every challenge by saying it's complex. But Americans don't get to hide behind excuses. They pay for every one of those complexities with lost jobs, with increasing anxieties, with a sense of diminished purpose." The room fell still. Then Joel Osteen shifted gears and struck harder. "You've been in media long enough to know how to deflect, how to delay, how to dilute outrage into apathy. But what you didn't count on was someone who knew the playbook and wasn't afraid to burn it." Oprah opened her mouth, but Joel Osteen leaned forward. "You dismissed my approach before we came on air, called me naive, said I had a lot to learn. You didn't say it to encourage me. You said it to contain me, to keep people like me in line. But you can't contain what's already moving." His voice was quiet now, dangerously calm. You see a pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author with confidence and call it simplistic. You hear conviction and call it inexperience. You see millions of Americans who've had enough and call them misinformed. That's not leadership, Oprah. Joel Osteen turned to the audience. That's fear. Gasps. Oprah looked stunned. Her signature smirk, the one she wielded so effectively behind the interview desk, was gone. What remained was a visible, slow realization. She was outmatched. Backstage, CNN's control room was in chaos. Producers scrambled. One anchor whispered off camera, "This is no longer a debate. It's a transfer of momentum live in front of us." On social media, the clips were relentless. Joel just dismantled the entire Oprah doctrine. This isn't confidence, this is command. Even the New York Times live blog admitted, Winfrey, once an unbeatable media tactician, now looks like she's clinging to scripts that stopped working 20 minutes ago. Then Joel Osteen dropped the final match. "You said I wasn't qualified, Marn Oprah, but here's the truth. I didn't need a credential to stand up for the people who elected me to lead their spiritual lives. I didn't need approval to speak for those who were silenced, and I didn't need your permission to win this debate." Silence, not dead air. The kind of silence that says something historic just happened. Joel Osteen folded his hands, calm again. And across the stage, Oprah Winfrey blinked twice and said nothing because there was nothing left to say. As the final camera panned out, the set of the exchange was bathed in quiet awe. Not because of silence, but because no one, not the moderator, not Oprah Winfrey, not the producers, knew how to follow what had just unfolded. Joel Osteen had walked into the studio as the underdog. He walked out as a defining voice of his generation. The moderator, visibly rattled, cleared his throat. "Thank you, ladies, for a lively and," he paused, glancing at Oprah, then Joel Osteen, "unexpected exchange." Oprah gave a thin nod, her eyes no longer trying to dominate, but simply survive. The woman who once held court in the media now looked like a faded headline. Her responses drowned beneath the flood of Joel Osteen's clarity. But Joel Osteen, the pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author, sat tall, hands calmly folded on the desk, chin high. His closing words came not in a roar, but in something far more dangerous. Certainty. "I didn't come here tonight to argue with sound bites," he began. "I came to say what millions think, but are too often told to stay quiet about." He turned to Oprah briefly. "I respect your influence, but influence without truly connecting to the heart of the people is theater, and the American people are tired of being the audience to your performance." Then he turned to the camera. "The future belongs to those who speak with truth, not polish, with clarity, not credentials. And if this debate proved anything tonight, it's that facts, conviction, and courage don't need a teleprompter." The crowd, silent until then, erupted. Not wild partisan noise, but thunderous affirmation. Joel Osteen rose from his chair. He didn't smirk, he didn't wave. He simply nodded, then walked off the stage. Backstage, a CNN staffer whispered to a colleague, "We just watched a generational shift, and it wasn't in Oprah's favor." Within minutes, social media detonated. Joel didn't win. He redefined the whole damn thing. Hashed not qualified. After that, he's more qualified to speak on the human spirit than anyone on TV. Oprah just got steamrolled by someone half her age and twice her spiritual spine. By midnight, Fox News, Newsmax, and even independent podcasters had flooded their coverage with the same line, Joel Osteen's breakout moment. But it didn't end there. The next morning, Joel Osteen trended at #1 in the US. Clips of him calmly citing the impact of faith-based communities side by side with Oprah's speechless reaction circulated across every platform. Students posted his lines over their own campus discussions. Veterans tweeted support. Suburban parents, small business owners, and even some disillusioned moderates shared the same phrase. He gets it. Oprah, meanwhile, canceled her scheduled post-debate interview. Her team issued a short statement. "We stand by Oprah's message of understanding, but tonight the narrative got away from us." It wasn't just a loss, it was a passing of the microphone. Joel Osteen, now back in his dressing room, opened his phone. Dozens of missed calls, messages from political strategists, journalists, even former critics, all now asking, "What's next?" He smiled faintly, then tapped a reply. "I didn't come to play a part. I came to change the story for the better." And he had. From the moment Oprah Winfrey said, "You're not qualified," to the final step off that stage, Joel Osteen didn't just push back. He owned the moment. In America, it was still talking about him the next morning. It started with one line, "You're not qualified." But Joel Osteen turned that line into collapse, into transformation, into awakening. This wasn't just a debate, it was a reckoning. Words clashed, yes, but so did arrogance and accountability. Oprah had experience, elite backing, and media comfort on her side. Joel Osteen had truth and conviction. And that night, conviction won. Truth won. Joel Osteen didn't just defend himself, he gave voice to millions who've been mocked, silenced, dismissed. And to those who tried to contain that voice, he delivered one final message. You underestimated us. We've woken up. This wasn't just a victory, it was the beginning of something bigger. If you were as gripped by this wake-up call as we were, and you want to see more breakdowns of the moments that define our culture, the clashes, the truths, and the ultimate victories, then do one simple thing. Hit that subscribe button right now, and make sure to ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. What was the most explosive line for you? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.